Welcome beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Like countless others, Reiki found me when I wasn't even looking, and then it ignited a whole new world of questions. This podcast explores topics of interest for the spiritually curious. Join me for discussions and special guests on subjects such as past lives, crystal healing, spiritual awakening, ascension, energy healing, and more, all to assist and inspire you along your unique soul's journey. This episode is sponsored by our BTRG insiders, who receive special exclusive benefits each and every month. You can find out more later in this episode. Thank you, insiders. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Beyond the Reiki Gateway. I'm your host, Andrea Kennedy. Today, we are joined by Dabney Lawless, whose journey into astrology began with those little irresistible star scrolls that you could buy in the grocery checkout lines back in the 1970s and 80s. Do you remember those? I know I do. In her late 20s, Dabney had a disappointing experience with an astrologer, but that convinced her to learn it for herself. She went on to study with renowned astrologer Stephen Forrest all the way through his master level certification. She's here to give us her perspective and insights into what we might expect in 2025 through her unique lens of evolutionary astrology. Thanks so much for joining me here, Dabney. I really am so excited. We don't do much astrology here on the podcast, so I'm super curious what you have to say about what we can expect.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me. I'm very appreciative. Yeah, this is going to be a big year coming up. So 2025 is kind of the year of change and revolution in our personal lives as well as our collective lives.
Yeah, I know, right? Exciting times for sure. And I want to ask you right off the bat, you describe yourself as an evolutionary astrologer. And I guess maybe I didn't realize there were different kinds. So could you explain what that is and put it into context for us?
Absolutely. That's such a good question. And it's one that I often get myself. So there are all different kinds of like schools of astrology. So that really is what it is. It's kind of like the school you study under. So a lot of people study more traditional astrology, and there's something called Hellenistic astrology that goes back to kind of its more traditional roots. And then there's more modern astrology. I am a modern astrologer, which means I incorporate a lot of the things that have come along throughout the centuries and the new findings and studying. And evolutionary astrology specifically looks at past life patterns. And so you don't have to believe in past lives to believe in evolutionary astrology. It can be ancestral lineage or your DNA, but what it looks at specifically is what's called the nodes of the moon. And we put a particular emphasis on that. And we look at where your soul has been and where it wants to go. So there is kind of a big karmic element, and I use kind of karmic language when I talk about the kind of astrology when I look at someone's chart, or so that plays heavily into it. And I also, I love the Stephen Forrest school, not the Jeffrey Wolf Green necessarily, but I also look very heavily at Pluto as something that is very karmic and forms the basis of who we are in a lot of ways.
Ah, I see. You mentioned karma, and I've stumbled upon so many different ideas of what karma is. From your perspective in your work, what does karma mean?
I'm so happy you asked that question, because so often people kind of think of karma as a very tit for tat sort of like, this is the example I like to use, that people think of karma as, in a past life you may have stolen a horse, and so in this life someone might steal your car. Like there's kind of like a reaction. But the way I was taught and the way that I kind of see it is, you may have stole a horse in a past lifetime. You're more apt to steal a car in this lifetime. So it's like you continue to do the same things over and over again until you consciously decide you don't want to do that anymore, that it's not serving your higher good. And you break that merry-go-round pattern where we kind of get in a rut. We do things over and over and over again, but we realize that it's not serving us. And I think it takes a lot of strength and consciousness to break out of those ruts. But once you have a map, and that's what evolutionary astrology really is a map for how to get your soul from where it has been to where it wants to go, then you can actually participate and co-create with the cosmos and be more conscious about your decisions.
Oh, I'm really glad I did ask that question because I've never heard of that before, like karma only being really about the person. I've always heard it like at least some like a cause and effect or, kind of like what you're saying. I I wouldn't have said tit for tat, like you did, but I mean, I have heard that. But that's really interesting about it just being about the individual. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we can look at kind of a collective karma and a collective reckoning, but I think that that is about consequences. That's really consequences for choices we make. And so I read a really interesting book last year that kind of says that we have no free will. And I don't agree with that premise. I do believe we have free will, but I think free will is really hard. I think that we have conditioning from our DNA and our childhoods and potentially karma, past lives that make our choices very automatic. And that's why I think a lot of people get stuck or feel unhappy because they don't really see the potential to break out of what they've done before. And even if people tell them, here is an opportunity, like, I mean, think about, how many times have you been, not you or I specifically, but like, we've had a girlfriend that's been dating someone and everyone around her knows that that is a boyfriend is not a good pick for her. And they tell her, but she can't see what everyone around her can see. So I really do believe that we can't change others, but we can change ourselves. And that's where the free will comes into play.
Mm. And then, so let's bring astrology into that then, because w- what is that? What's the relationship there with free will and karma?
So what I love about astrology, and this is why I, when you introduced me, you said like I got a reading that was not really up to par. It was so funny because I've loved astrology my whole life, and I think there was something about it that just really resonated with me, and so when I went to an astrologer that really gave me like very basic platitudes and didn't explain things in a way that I could understand them, I just didn't feel like that was serving anybody's purpose. And I think there's something, we've all been to healers or psychics or we've done that, and you come away feeling like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what's the action here? It can make, it can be that initial like adrenaline high where you feel calmed or you're told what you want to hear. But I think what I loved when I found my teacher, Stephen Forrest, was that he explained astrology in a way that one is, not astrobabble, like, the this, the that, and, like you can get all tangled up in the decans and things like that. He simplifies it, but it offers you a map, your own personal map to the best life you can have. And I think once you recognize that there is a blueprint, there is kind of a direction that you can follow, then you can really you can make different choices. And that's what astrology is. Astrology is just a map. Now, it also gives you your natal chart. So when they say your birth chart or your natal chart, that's the map for the best life you can live. When we talk about transits, what's happening in the sky right now, how it interacts with your life map. So there's different times where things are up for you. There's different times where there's an opportunity. So I do believe in that there's something bigger. I always say at the end of my podcast, the universe is conspiring to help you, and there's a reason and a season for it all. So you may really want to get married, like right now, but that may not be the plan. So looking at when is right timing for certain things, when are certain things activated for you? There's times where you can see things more clearly than others. And so really working with the cosmos to fulfill that life plan for the happiest life you can live is where the astrology comes in.
Mm. You mentioned the plan, like I might want to, I mean, I'm already married, but I might want to get married, but that's not part of the plan. So who made the plan?
That's another great question. I love this conversation, by the way, Andrea. Like, you're asking me like really cool questions. So I think you made the plan. I made the plan. We make our choices. And so, again, this is how I orient and make sense of life. And so, I always believe like if something doesn't resonate with you, don't listen to it. But it really resonated with me when I heard the idea of like this kind of cosmic diving board where it's like, okay, you decided like you want to, kind of, for me personally, I'll use a personal example. I have many lifetimes of being in service to people, but also with that comes a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, a lot of anxiousness. So part of my cosmic diving board that I wanted to jump into this lifetime is to kind of learn to have faith and trust and to have a little bit more of a spiritual path versus you know, hyper vigilant path. So the setup often with, and going back to like the karma and the piece of the evolutionary astrology belief is that we sort of select who our parents are, our circumstances, to then set it up again so we have an opportunity in this lifetime to learn lessons, to have experiences that then we can say, wow, this is really familiar. Like, I think maybe I need to do something differently. And that's where the soul growth comes in, is then you have this ability to say, I want to do something differently. But I often find people do want to do something differently. They just have no idea how. And that's where I think the map or the life map kind of gives them a clue to what does it look like when you are in right relationship with your soul, and what does it look like when maybe you're off track and like feeling the anxiety, the depression, the anger, the hopelessness.
Yeah. Now, yeah, this is really interesting because it's kind of the chicken and the egg thing too, is what came to my mind. So, yeah, I've heard that too about we choose our parents and all, and oh yeah, I'm on board with all that kind of thing. I don't know how our listeners are, with that kind of thing, but I don't know, resonates with me. We had a guest on a long time ago, and he was even talking about how we choose our bodies, we actually choose our bodies. And I could see how that would be really important too. And so, what do you think then about this? Are we choosing our birth date? I mean, are we choosing our astrology to support what we're what our plan is for the life?
That might be above my pay grade. I think, there are these greater mysteries of life. But as somebody who grew up in an abusive household, who grew up in poverty, I can relate to a lot of people that come to readings to get a reading from me, that
Hmm.
say that they've had, why would I choose, to have this horrible thing happen? And that is, it's hard to wrap your brain around. But for my own personal life, I look at every experience that I've had and every experience that I've overcome was part of my journey to who I am today. And I think that's part of the choice to break out of the mentality that things are happening to you versus you are a part of this. And you can, if you don't feel like a victim, or you don't feel like things have happened to you, and you feel like things can, be formed, your life is still unfolding before you. You don't have to be trapped in that mentality. So, as far as your birthday and things like that, that's part of the greater mystery to me. My guess is yes, that's like, part of this kind of big co-creation. But, the metaphor of the cosmic diving board, I would love to know how that could all happen in the mysteries of life. But this to me is a really foundational way of orienting ourselves to understanding that we actually do have agency in our life, and we don't have to be unhappy. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people are looking for, is help breaking out of unhealthy, unhappy patterns.
Yeah. And speaking of that, here we are embarking on 2025. Woo! And there's a lot of change happening. We'll have new leadership in the US, and things are happening all over the world, and we don't have to remind people of all of that stuff. But if you would share with us, what are you seeing from an astrological standpoint that we might take away, that we might ponder about this coming year?
So this is actually a very big year. And it's the next couple years are unprecedented. And I know we've all heard that word so many times, but in our lifetimes, what's transpiring has never happened. And that is that we have 5 planets that, and like 5 outer planets and social planets, and then the nodes. And so, by the way, I'm going to speak a little astrobabble, but I promise I will explain everything. But they're all changing signs. And what this means is we are entering a completely new paradigm. We are entering into a whole new world that we've never experienced before. Tremendous change is coming. Life is accelerating. And we really don't exactly know what's on the horizon. We can look to past, because they always say like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. So, I've got some historical examples for us, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us to recognize that the coming year is all about us stepping into a whole new version of ourselves. So that's the personal thing. And the collective thing, it's about stepping to a whole new version of ourselves because everything is up and changing right now. And it's all changing in a very fast, fiery, mental way. We're going from earth and water to air and fire. So that's just a big shift. There's a lot of discussion about we're entering the age of Aquarius, and I do believe that we are on that path. I have absolutely no idea, again, above my pay grade, exactly when the age of Aquarius begins, but this really is getting us to a new place where we may not recognize the world or our own personal world in a few years. So yeah, that's the bigger overarching theme, is change, revolution, breaking down old structures, new ideas, completely, redoing our lives in a whole new way.
Yeah, well, I need to ask a question here because haven't we been doing that? Because, this a lot was changing back in for 2016, so it was kind of like there were some things changing then, where some of the same adjectives that you just used, well, that applied then too. So, are some of the astrological things that we're looking at this year, did they start back then, or are they repeating, or what's the relationship? Because some of this isn't brand new.
Okay, that's a good question. So I would say we really entered this kind of moving into a new paradigm in 2020, but the big thing here is Pluto has been in Capricorn and it is moving into Aquarius. So let's start with that one, because that's a really big one and that can inform sort of what you're talking about. So Pluto is an outer planet. It moves very slowly. It has a 248-year cycle. So in our lifetimes, we have never lived through Pluto in Aquarius, or excuse me, Pluto in Aquarius or Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto destroys whatever it touches in a lot of ways. It exposes the rot, the things that no longer are working. So Pluto is always somewhere. Okay. So we're always working on something, right? So, Pluto was in Libra and Libra has to do with relationships. And that's when people started getting divorces in the 70s. And there was like women's liberation and things like that. So Pluto really tracks with societal shifts. So when Pluto is in Capricorn, Capricorn is about the government and it's about power and hierarchies and the police and anything that is like power structure. And it's very traditional and it's very hierarchical. And so the last time Pluto was in Capricorn was when the United States Constitution was created. And we were basically like, we don't want to be under this king anymore because it had gotten so bad. So basically, Pluto had been in Capricorn and had been exposing all of the ways in which the world had been serving only the people in power. That's the Tea Party and things like that. Okay, but that's very United States focused. The United States has been going through what's called a Pluto return because we created the Declaration of Independence under a Pluto in Capricorn. So basically, whenever countries have charts too, whenever a country goes through a Pluto return, you have to really have a very strong sense of, right and wrong and integrity, and things have to be really doing well for you to survive that Pluto return. And so Pluto comes along in Capricorn, and it has been since 2008. It has been saying, where is this broken? So right when Pluto went into Capricorn, we had the 2008 financial meltdown, right?
Yes.
So we've had this since 2008. Sorry that the sun is shining brightly here. 2008, the Pluto has been showing us where people in power have been corrupt, where there have not been taking care of the people, where there's been tremendous wealth inequality, right? So I think everyone can agree that things have been falling apart since this time. We are moving into a time where something new is being born. But a lot of times things have to sort of fall apart in order to recognize that it's broken. So then we can go to the next phase. So I hope that answers your question. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, we've been in this kind of like feeling like everything's falling apart. But I think the difference now is like it's been falling apart and falling away, and we've been seeing what's wrong. Now we're going to take action to do things differently.
Nice. Yeah. My analogy, yeah, I started using it back then, around 2016, and that is when a forest burns down, you know, and everybody stands around and goes, "Oh my gosh!" And I'm speaking actually from my life. Yellowstone, near and dear to my heart, Yellowstone National Park. They had that huge fire back in the late '80s, and I would drive through there, and it was like little black toothpicks. It was terrible. It was just heartbreaking, but then you could start to see the life come back, and the seeds were germinating. There are some species of lodgepole pines, I believe it is. They have to have the intense temperature of fire in order to germinate. And so nature also reflects what we're talking about, how things can get sort of unwieldy, and unhealthy. And then there needs to be, quite frankly, devastation, if we want to put a word on it. But it's through that new life happens, rebirth, and where sunlight could not reach the earth or the little plants and seeds, sunlight got in there. And then the forest started coming back and back and back. And, fire fertilizes the soil too. So that's my little jaunt over into nature. But I think it's fitting because we can see these cycles just in nature if we allow ourselves to look. And it's never an ending. It's a transition. It's a change. And no, it isn't easy. And um, certainly it was very difficult for many people, also the wildlife there. So, it's not about sugarcoating anything, but it's about transition and change. And I'm hearing, you describe that. And I guess I don't know if you can even tell me this yet, and I really need to let you talk more. But when is the building really gonna start? Can you give us a hint about that? I mean, when is the fire really over? Do we know this? I'm taking a minute here to invite you to beyondthereikigateway.com. We have a brand new podcast optimized website that will really serve you so much better. All the episodes are there in both audio and video. Feeds to your favorite podcast apps are available, and the ability to leave reviews is now super easy. You can even leave us a voicemail and more. We've made improvements across the board for all of our listeners to benefit. And we've also up-leveled our BTRG Insider program. Benefits now include 24-hour early access to all our regular episodes, more exclusive behind the scenes content only insiders get to access, with the ability to send in their questions for special Ask Me Anything episodes. You'll secure ad free listening, limited only to my updates and our guest offers. And perhaps the thing I like best is you'll be able to access all the episodes and the insider content on your preferred podcast feed. That's right, everything in one convenient place, just for you, making it very easy. All the new features are waiting for you, and more details about our BTRG Insider program. They're just a click away over at beyondthereikigateway.com. Above all, thank you for listening, and a special shout out to our BTRG insiders from the past and those coming on board. Your support absolutely helps us to produce our show.
This is not fear mongering,
Oh,
but
no.
we are probably going into the fire this year.
Oh,
So
really? Oh my goodness. Okay.
yeah. So what I think has been happening is I think that we have all seen that, you know, the government or the police or, and this is irregardless of politics or your political leanings, that things aren't working for people.
Mhm.
People have been, no matter who you talk to, we're not happy with the healthcare system. Like, no,
Right.
there's all of these things where it's just been like the cavalry is not coming, right? Like we kind of sort of are recognizing that we have to do things ourselves. And during this Pluto and Capricorn time, it's been very isolating. We've all been sitting on our phones, doom scrolling, right? There is this sense of isolation that we are on our own. And, and I think this has more to do with Neptune in Pisces, but there's been a tremendous addiction crisis. So we've been in crisis. So sometimes when things are so critical, we get to a point where there needs to be a revolution. Pluto in Aquarius is about revolution. And so we have several different things happening this year that indicate kind of revolutionary and warlike um, energy. Now, does this mean we'll go to war? I think that the world is shifting. We're already in wars, right? So there's already been this energy, but now it's about groups and the collective and what's good for everybody, not just what's good for the 1% or the people at the very tippy top. So Pluto just went in Aquarius in November. So we are very much on the precipice of this. It's just starting. It is a 20-year cycle. So it's going to be there for 20 years. If I had to give it my best guess, when is the fire over and the sun comes out? not possibly till the 2030s. So in some ways, now, does that mean that we should live in fear and that our lives are going to be horrible for the next several years? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that we are going through a process of metamorphosis, and we don't know where we're going to land on the other side. And if you want to have, kind of a nature analogy, I loved yours, but another one is that we are finally the caterpillars in the chrysalis, and we do not know what kind of butterfly is going to emerge. Now, it is a painful process, probably, for a caterpillar to change into a butterfly. So I am not saying like this is going to be easy or, la la la, age of Aquarius. Like, I kind of have a little bit of skepticism around that sort of thinking, but I do believe something new and exciting is on the horizon, and we have to embrace it. And that's part of that free will, that choice. Like, what are we going to do in the face of change? You can resist it, which is painful, or you can embrace it and figure out what your role is within the new paradigm.
Yeah, I am really in an odd little place in my thinking as you say that. And what it is what popped in my mind was that saying or something. I've always really liked it. And it's necessity is the mother of invention. And what I found myself thinking about, Dabney, was the opportunity that individuals will have because certain things won't be, you know, expected, or we just won't be on autopilot anymore. And if we're challenged by different things, I think individuals will be actually given an opportunity to be more creative and look for solutions that we've never, been pressed to look for before. So I'm thinking this could be an amazing time of innovation and creativity and absolute wonder. Again, not to say it'll be easy or anything, but you know, how many times, if we think about our own lives, how many times have we been under pressure or been going through something that's been difficult? And it's that sort of pressure that we made diamonds, right? Because,
Love that.
yeah, it's like, so I'm not going to go there. I mean, I'm not going to think everything's going to be all bad or anything like that. We're just going to have a lot of challenges that bring opportunity. I think, and I have to say, probably individually, but also in groups, perhaps also in nations or whatever that might look like. But I find it fascinating because, we're talking about an overall thing, the overall feeling and, um, you know, in a broader sense, but everybody is also operating on their own chart and on their own free will and all of that within that landscape. So that just fascinates me that we can talk about astrology in the broader sense of nations and world and all of that. And then it's like, oh yeah, and then I have my personal life and you have yours. And that to me is just remarkable.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the rise of democracy.
Yeah.
That was the birth of our nation, really. It was also, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. So people stand up during this time and say, like, this isn't working for me. I want to do things differently. So Aquarius is very much about taking care of the collective, the group. And so it isn't as personal, but Pluto in Aquarius kind of gives everybody this sense of like, okay, here we go. We need to do things differently because what we've been doing isn't working. And that was also the Age of Enlightenment happened in Pluto and Aquarius. Also, the Industrial Revolution. So what's interesting is like, do I think we'll have another industrial revolution? No, we're going to have a technological revolution. And we're already seeing it. And that's always the thing with Pluto, is you start to get hints of what's coming, a year or two before it actually changes signs, right? So here we have this rise of AI, and with the use of Chat GPT and all of these other AI systems, it is going to revolutionize our lives. I mean, it really is. It already has revolutionized the media industry. It is going to touch every aspect of our lives, and we just don't know exactly how yet. So during the Industrial Revolution, that was very scary for farmers and people who, didn't want to move and do assembly lines and things. You know what I mean? Like, things happen that we are not sure what the end result will be. And that's where we're at, is we don't know, but I believe we will probably see the dark side of technology in a lot of ways. I think that's, Pluto does expose things that are, so the technocrats and the people that are not necessarily serving our best interest. But I think we're also going to see some tremendous breakthroughs with, finding cures for cancer. And I think there also can be new governmental systems that, we may have a whole new constitution within 5 or 10 years that may be better, that actually may, repair some of the damage from the past. So we just don't know. And the reason I don't do a ton of predictive astrology, because again, I believe people have free will. So it depends on the choices we make and how we respond to things, and how we embrace what's happening in the world around us. So there is a great opportunity for people to come together in collectives in a way that they haven't for hundreds of years. This is an opportunity to break free from that loneliness. And we'll see what's on the horizon for Pluto and Aquarius. But I, for one, am really looking forward to this energy, because, sorry about the sun creeping on my face. I'm, for one, am really looking forward to this energy, because Pluto in Capricorn it's been heavy. And I think everyone's kind of ready for a new energy.
Yes. And so when would a shift be then?
So Pluto moved into Aquarius in November, but
Okay.
keeping in mind that this is a 20-year cycle, we're getting warmed up. So
Okay.
I think you're going to start to see this year, usually the first Pluto, what's called ingress, like when it first goes in, there's usually something dramatic that happens. So like we had, the AIDS crisis during Pluto and Scorpio, and we had the banking crisis in Pluto and Capricorn that kind of kicked things off. So let's talk about the other things that are happening in 2025, because there's
Great.
several. There's, like I said, there's a lot going on. So
Okay.
Neptune is also moving into Aries. So the last time Neptune was in Aries was during the American Civil War. So again, not predicting a civil war, but there is something to that energy of like, oh, okay, things maybe need to change. We're not happy with the status quo. Neptune has to do with spirituality. Neptune has to do with care for others. It's really kind of our connection to the universe. Aries is very initiating. So it's like, okay, we need to do something different when it comes to caring for people, right? So the Civil War, people recognize that slavery wasn't okay, right? So what is the thing that we're going to kind of say, like, we need to take action on this now to protect people and to care for others? So the last time Neptune was in Aries, there was also a tremendous rise in spiritualism. So, I think Neptune has been in Pisces, which is its home sign. And this has really been interesting, because I think that a lot of people thought that that was going to be so great and so spiritual. But what ended up happening is we got a lot of delusion and a lot of escapism. We really saw the opioid crisis, and we saw the rise in fake news. And we saw that we couldn't believe like we would read an article, because like we're used to, like, you read the news and it's real, but like there was this whole other delusion at work where you read something and you don't know if it's real or not. And so then we start to see deep fakes and all these things, and that's very Neptune and Pisces. So Neptune's moving into Aries, and I think people are going to wake up from a little bit of a delusion. Like, I think there's kind of more of a, like, wait a minute, is that real? Is that what I want to be doing? I think there's kind of going to be you know on the downside, there could be kind of Christian nationalism, and there could be like a crusading kind of warlike energy, but there also could be like people finding new and innovative ways and pioneering ways to help people with like alcoholism and addictions. And there also can be a way that we take care of people, a rise in actually socialism. So it's interesting how different ways that this can play out. But I do believe that this is, again, another very action oriented, spiritual warrior energy that can take us to the next place that we're going.
Yeah. And did you say that was coming in March or
Yeah, the first pass is in March, and what ends up happening with these outer planets is they kind of dip in for a while, and then they dip back into where they were, and then they go back in, and then they go back in for good. And so once it goes back in for good, in 2026, it'll be there till 2039.
oh
So
wow.
again, we have to realize, like, 2025 is the beginning of what's to come. Like, it's the initiation of a new world, really.
Yeah.
And so we can't expect in 2025 everything to be fixed overnight. But do I believe that this is working for our higher good and that there will be a path to a better place? Absolutely. But
Yeah.
it's a process for sure.
This dipping in, coming and then returning, that dipping in that you mentioned, I think that is absolutely, I don't know what the word is, but perfect, right? Because if not, things could, well, that's for balance because it's like, you do a flyby kind of thing. It's like some influence there and then, alleviate and then influence, alleviate, letting things work and sink in and continue, but not having something completely come in and just dominate, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But so that kind of makes sense to me as far as coming in and then leaving and that kind of thing. I think that's a gentler way, maybe, to affect change or to support change. And also, perhaps it gives people a respite, to sort of reflect and make some decisions for themselves. Um, so great. Okay, so what else is in store?
Okay, so and to that point, what I will say is I don't think there's going to be a ton of collective rest this year. I don't think we're going to get a lot of opportunities for that. And so, what I want to also say is we need to ground personally. So there can be chaos at our front door, but we can be okay inside. And I think that that's, with Reiki and all of these other practices, there's a way that you can be stable and sound and grounded and connected to nature, even if like there's new AI technologies and it's disrupting our financial systems, and we can still be okay. And that's what I want us to keep coming back to, is what I'm talking about really here is some collective energy. But maybe what I should really quickly do is back up and give people the higher road for each of these kind of bigger transits, for yourself.
Oh yeah, that would be great because I couldn't agree with you more. No matter what's going on out there, we get to choose what we focus on. We get to choose our daily activities, for the most part. Um, and we get a lot of say in our day-to-day life, and we get certainly every bit of say about our mental focus, how what we choose to, you know, focus our attention on. That's us.
Yeah. And so with Pluto going into Aquarius, I actually think there's a tremendous opportunity to embrace technology, to
Mhm.
start your own YouTube channel, to start your own podcast, to, the wonderful thing about Pluto and Aquarius is so much has been democratized. So, people can do things they never could do before. The use of Chat GPT is very helpful for people. You used to have a big team to do the things that you can personally do yourself now. So that's one thing that's, a way to embrace this energy. And another way is really organizing groups, participating in groups. Don't sit at home and watch Netflix by yourself. Like, get out and remember what it's like to actually be with people. That's a really big thing right now. Join memberships, join clubs, join groups. Group activities are going to be supported right now. And I think that we've been in this kind of doom scrolling cycle of just isolation. And that's so Pluto and Capricorn. It doesn't have to be that way. Break out of that. Go join the Sierra Club. Like, do something different. Okay. So that's a Pluto and Aquarius thing. And also look at where you have a gift to give, the collective. Like, what's your individual gift that you want to give to other people? So share your gift. Even if it's like, my hairdresser who's awesome, she used house sits our chickens. And so she started painting portraits of our chickens and found out that she loved that. And now she has a store on Etsy where she sells portraits of chickens. Okay, that's a silly example, but that's very Pluto and Aquarius, right? Take advantage of the opportunities now to do the things that you've always wanted to do and give back to other people. Neptune and Aries, this is high spiritual. This is spiritual warrior stuff. Like if you've ever seen those like yoga tank top spiritual gangster, like that's where we're at. Like you can, find your spiritual community and really lean into it and be a warrior for people from a higher place. So that's a personal way that you can use this energy, help have compassion for other people, volunteer in an addiction center, like figure out what it is for you, what your personal individual gift is, and recognize that you're given the motivation to do that now. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Uranus going into Gemini. And this starts in July 7th of 2025. And again, there's some dipping in and out, but really that goes until 2033. Okay, so we've got another long period. And so this is why I said this is really unprecedented that all of these bigger outer planets are changing signs all in 1 year. That does not happen in our lifetimes. So this is the third Uranus return for the United States. So much like the Pluto return, we're in a Uranus return now. The Pluto return is over. We've made our choices. And now the Uranus return. So now it's this revolutionary energy of like, how are we going to change this country? And that's a big thing. And it's going to be a big theme. Now, Uranus is the planet of change. It is the planet of lightning strikes. It is the planet of upheaval. Okay, so Uranus is always somewhere, and Uranus has been in Taurus. Okay, so we've really seen a lot of the consequences and of climate change, right? Like we've kind of, and there's been a lot of changes in our agricultural industry over the past decade. So Uranus in Taurus has been about change to the land. Uranus going into Gemini has to do with ideas, new, fresh ideas. So there's going to be a change in the way people think. And so for the United States, each time we've had a Uranus return, we've gone to war. So there was the Revolutionary War, there was the Civil War, and there was World War II. So do what you will with that information. Again, we don't necessarily have to be in a shooting war or a bombing war. It could be a war of ideas. It could be a technological war. There could be, there's all different ways this can play out. But know that fresh new ideas that are revolutionizing our country are on their way. So that is going to happen from also in the 1600s, this is something I wrote down. It was the scientific revolution. So keep in mind that it's revolution of ideas. That's what Uranus and Gemini is. So on a personal level, how can you think differently? How can you, if you've always wanted to write a book, this is the time to do that. Right? So, this is about how you can look at things differently. You've been curious about astrology. Maybe you want to study astrology. Maybe you just want to get an astrology reading. This is the time for new ideas to be born. And so, if you kind of look at the themes, there's so many themes of change and revolution and new ideas. That is really the theme for this year, collectively, but also individually. How do you want to do things differently?
Yeah. I am inspired by that, really. And I really like how you're bringing through, the different options or the different possibilities there, because it reminds me that, even though no matter what happens, nothing's all good, nothing's all bad. We're on a spectrum here, and I love the idea about an idea revolution. I do love that, because also on a personal level, because as you were talking, I thought, oh, it would be good to examine, for myself, what do I think I know, and maybe delve into that and challenge myself in that area, you know, read some different books, listen to different people, get new perspectives. Um, not because I'm wrong, not because I'm right, but just to hear more. And maybe that's a good thing, because when you were talking about isolationism and all of the things that we've been doing, we've been in a divisive time. So it sounds to me like some of that might be alleviated through this cycle, given what we may choose.
I think there's an opportunity for us to find like-minded people. And I think by the end of the decade, I think that there's much more unity. I don't believe that the divisiveness is going to end this year. But I think the divisiveness within ourselves can end, maybe. Like, we can kind of, it is really this, we're disrupting the status quo. So I think the status quo has wanted to be disrupted for a long time. Now, how we go about that, obviously in this country we have very differing ideas of how that revolution should have taken place or should take place, right? And so I have my own opinions. I won't share those here, but I think within ourselves, what we can understand is that choices are made, there are consequences. So here we are, Saturn is moving into Aries. That's another one I wanted to talk about. So Saturn has to do with consequences. Saturn is about, the analogy I always use with Saturn is the teacher that gave you the most homework in school and you hated that teacher, but that teacher was the one that you learned the most from. And so Saturn is here and it's moving into Aries. And so when Saturn is in Aries, there is this kind of, again, an initiation. There is a sense of like, okay, we need to actually now fix anything that's broken. Like, you break it, you buy it kind of thing is sort of a Saturn and Aries. And so how are we going to fix the problems? So now we've identified that there are problems. That was Pluto and Capricorn. Okay, now the revolution is here. There's a wrecking ball. The status quo is being disrupted. Well, this spring there's going to be a sense of like, okay, we can smash everything, but how are we going to fix it? And so that's going to give us that kind of structure. That's going to give us the initiation of new ideas around structure. And Saturn is also going to be making a conjunction to Neptune. And I think the big takeaway for that is around this initiating structure around caring for people, because when people are suffering and it becomes obvious that people are suffering, there's going to have to be somebody who comes in and actually says, okay, now here's what we're going to do about that. Here's how we're going to take it to the next phase. So that's the Saturn in Aries. And on a personal level, I think that's also very much a, like, how do you get organized? How do you kind of say, oh, okay, I have been neglecting to pay my credit card bills. Like, I need to get myself together and I need to make a plan. Like, Saturn in Aries is very much about, like, no one's coming to save me. So how am I going to save myself? There is no white knight on a horse. So, like, let's, buckle down and figure out what makes the most sense. And it's almost like your own personal warrior. Like, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be afraid of, you know, I'm not going to put the covers over my head because Saturn's been in Pisces, which Saturn hates to be in Pisces. And that was very much like, oh, the problem will go away. It'll just fix itself. It's not going to fix itself. So now here we are. Let's fix some things. Okay. And so in your own personal life, where do you need to clean the cupboards and the junk drawer? Right.
Yes.
So the last piece here that I figured I would, kind of leave you with, and I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about those two things that I talked about before I go into the changing of the nodes? Because that's another, very different energy.
Well, I think, we'll need to wrap up soon. So maybe move on to that last bit, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Amazing. So Jupiter is moving into Cancer. Okay. And so I wrote an article about this. And so I'm excited about Jupiter in Cancer for a couple different reasons, because I think it has a lot to do with self care. And I do believe it also has to do with an opportunity to heal rifts within families. So Jupiter brings luck. So if Saturn is the hard teacher, Jupiter's the really fun teacher and the one that, like, everyone wants to take their class. So Jupiter's moving into the sign of the mother and nurturing. So I think starting in, I believe it's in June. Okay. So starting in the spring, self-care is going to be paramount. So have a plan for your own self-care, connecting with nature. It's going to have to do a lot with, getting Reiki. That's a really fantastic healing modality. What are the healing modalities that you need to bring yourself back to your body? Because it's about the body. You need to get grounded back into your body. I think there's also, like I said, even if it's one-sided, there's ways to heal families and family lineages. So Jupiter in Cancer is a really nice time to, like, do some ancestral work. But it's also a time that, even if you can't heal a rift within your own family, because I know a lot of families have been torn apart or divided during this time, you can do the work for healing for both of you. So
Mm.
that's one of the things that I encourage people to do with this Jupiter in Cancer. From a collective level, there can be a little bit of a rise of patriotism and nationalism. LGBTQ rights have actually been in the news often during a Jupiter in Cancer. They usually actually, it's been coinciding with an increase in rights, because it's about kind of caring for other people and seeing people as equals. It's kind of a nurturing Cancer. The last thing that I want to talk about is that in January 11th, 2025, the North Node hits 0 Aries. Okay. So what this means is we're starting a new 12-year cycle. And so I think that that's a really good opportunity for everyone, if you want to mark your calendars, to kind of recognize that we are entering into this new paradigm. We're entering into a new place where each of us can re-envision our lives. I think that's the big theme, is what do we want for our lives personally? How do you want to get from A to B? And this is a really nice time to kind of check in with yourself, check in with your values, and kind of create a plan. Like, look at your astrology, talk to your loved ones and figure out, what are you really good at? What are you here to do? And then lean into it, because that's the whole next year. Next couple of years is about re-envisioning. So re-envision yourself, re-envision your life, especially if you're feeling stuck. We've all felt stuck for at least since 2020. I think that's a theme for a lot of people. We're going to get out of the quicksand. We're out of it now. So now, like, where are you going to go? You know, do you want to run a marathon? Like, what do you want to do? So the nodes are shifting, and we'll have the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. And so again, there is another opportunity there for spiritualism and really going to a higher place, not getting stuck in the anxiety and the fear and the obsessive worry. And really kind of that's the higher place is like looking to the future and how you can be more at peace with the universe.
Yes, inspiring for sure. Yes. And I like too how you wrap that up, Dabney, because we have so much power in our own lives and our own choices and that visioning, and how fitting that is that it's January. So many people are doing vision boards and, thinking about those things already. So to have the astrology sort of support that, I think that's extra unique and special.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's really kind of liberating. I think that a lot of what I just talked about too, like all of these, liberation is a theme. So it's revolution, but it's also freedom and liberation. So I think that, ever since COVID, people have been feeling very stuck. Like we feel like things aren't working, but we don't know where we're going. And now we're going there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like that's exciting. That's liberating, going someplace, movement, change. So
Yes.
I think that the people that are going to struggle the most are people that are fearful of change. And I know that there still may be consequences that are harsh and things may be difficult for people. So I don't want to belittle people's feelings around that. I also want to say that we have to do the work of, we can't change the whole world. We can't change other people. So we can ground into ourselves. We can heal ourselves. We can do our own work, and we can send positive love out into the world in the midst of all of these changes.
Absolutely. And as more individuals do that, it does change the world. It does. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dabney. And for our audience, our listeners and our viewers on YouTube, if they want to reach out and contact you, find out more about you and the different things that you offer, can you tell them, please, where to do that?
Yeah. So I also have a YouTube channel, and it's called Lawless Astrology. So Lawless, Lawless Astrology. And then also lawlessastrology.com is my website. And I also do readings. I don't have many openings, but hopefully there'll be an opening or two for you if you come on over.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So, absolutely. And I just want to thank you again for giving us your take on 2025 and all the different messages that you shared with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. And you can check the show notes or visit the website beyondthereikigateway.com to find out more about the podcast and connect with me. Please keep in mind that views and opinions expressed in the show don't necessarily reflect those of the podcast or anyone affiliated with its production or advertising. This program is presented for your entertainment only, and all information provided is to be utilized at the listener's own discretion. I, along with the BTRG team, hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy making it for you. Wishing you highest blessings until we meet again beyond the Reiki Gateway.